Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to just try and imagine a sickness so terrifying, so fast, that in just a few years, it killed about a third of the entire population of Europe.
We're talking around 25 million people in the 1300s. It's a scale that's almost impossible to comprehend.
Yeah, this wasn't just a bad flu season. It was an event that completely changed everything. Society, money, even how people thought about the world.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to get into. We'll look at the facts, where this disease actually came from, how something microscopic caused such chaos, and, how the world was forced to change because of it.
So the story doesn't begin in Europe, does it?
Not at all. It starts thousands of miles away, probably on the dry plains of Central Asia, back in the early 14th century.
And the plague was just there.
Yeah.
Living out in the wild.
It existed naturally in populations of rodents, like marmots and, of course, rats. It was their disease, really.
And the culprit, the actual scientific cause, is a bacteria.
Yes, a specific one called Yersinia pestis. It lives in the blood of these animals. But the key to its spread wasn't the rat itself, it was the flea.
The flea. So the flea bites an infected rat.
Right. And then when that rat dies, which it usually did, the infected flea gets hungry and jumps to a new host, looking for its next meal.
Okay, but how does a localized disease like that travel all the way to a place like Italy?
It hitched a ride. It traveled along the biggest global highway of the time, the Silk Road.
The trade routes?
Exactly. Merchants were moving goods back and forth, silks, spices, you name it, and they were, unknowingly carrying these infected fleas and rats in their cargo, in their luggage, even in their clothes.
Which brings us to 1347. This is the year it really hits Europe.
Yeah, that's the flashpoint. A few Italian merchant ships arrive at the port of Messina in Sicily. They're coming from the Black Sea.
And when they dock, the locals realize something is terribly wrong.
Oh, it's a nightmare. They find sailors on board who are either already dead or dying in this horrible way.
They tried to turn the ships away, didn't they?
They did, but it was just too late. The rats had already come ashore.
And that's the mechanism right there. The rats just climb down the docking ropes.
And scurry right into the city. From Messina, it just explodes. It moves on to other big port cities like Genoa and Venice. And within months, it has a foothold on the entire continent.
So once it's on land, how did it move so fast through people?
Well, the main way was still that bite from an infected rat flea. And you have to remember, black rats were everywhere in medieval homes and cities.
Right, in the walls and the food storage.
Absolutely. So when a rat died, the flea would just hop onto the nearest person. The bacteria, Yersinia pestis, gets into their bloodstream. And that's when the nightmare really begins.
The bacteria just multiplies like crazy inside the body.
It completely overwhelms the immune system. The body's defenses, the lymph nodes, try to fight back, but they can't handle it.
And that's what causes the buboes, right?
Yes. The lymph nodes swell up to the size of an apple, usually in the neck, armpits, or groin. They were incredibly painful and would turn black. That's why it's called the bubonic plague.
And then came the other symptoms?
High fevers, chills, exhaustion, and dark spots on the skin from internal bleeding. That's actually what gave the Black Death its name.
But wait, there was another way it could spread, one that was even worse.
Yeah, and this is crucial. If the infection got into a person's lungs, it became what we call pneumonic plague.
And that meant it was airborne.
Exactly. It could spread directly from person to person through coughing or sneezing. No rats or fleas needed.
Which in the crowded, cramped cities would have been
a death sentence. This form could kill a person in less than 24 hours. And because doctors had no concept of germs, they had no idea how to stop it. Most people died within 3 to 5 days.
It really was a perfect storm then, this horrible disease meeting the conditions of the Middle Ages.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to picture what a 14th century city was actually like.
It's nothing like what we have today.
Not even close. The streets were narrow, muddy, and just filled with trash. There was no garbage collection.
So people just threw their waste. Where?
Right out the window. Kitchen scraps, dirty water, even human waste all went straight into the street. It was an absolute paradise for rats.
So they had endless food and places to hide and breed.
And then you have the crowding. Houses were built right on top of each other. Whole families often lived and slept in a single room.
And basic hygiene, soap, clean water. That wasn't really a thing yet.
Not in the way we think of it. No running water, certainly. So these conditions just allowed the fleas and rats to thrive, and the plague spread way faster in the cities than out in the countryside.
So what did they do? What did the doctors try? They didn't understand what was happening, so their treatments must have been.
They were working with completely wrong ideas. The main theory was that the plague was caused by bad air or miasma, or that the body's fluids were out of balance.
Bad smells causing a deadly disease.
Right. So to fight it, people would carry around sweet-smelling herbs like lavender or rosemary, thinking it would clean the air around them.
That's where those famous plague doctor masks come from, with the long beaks.
Exactly. The beaks weren't for filtering germs. They were stuffed with herbs to block the bad smells.
And what about the idea of balancing the body's fluids?
That led to some really dangerous stuff. They would bleed patients using leeches or just by cutting them, thinking they were removing the sickness from the blood.
Which would just make them weaker.
Or worse, they'd also try cutting open the buboes to let the infection out.
Oh, that sounds like a terrible idea.
It was. It just spread the bacteria and often led to more infection. And then you had really bizarre remedies like rubbing onions or even chopped up pigeons on the sores.
The bottom line is, nothing worked.
Nothing. The real cure, antibiotics, wouldn't be invented for another 500 years. They were completely defenseless.
All of this. The death, the fear, the failed cures. It must have caused society to just break down.
It was a total upheaval. Before the plague, Europe was actually overcrowded. There were too many workers, so labor was cheap. Peasants had very little power.
But when a third of the workforce disappears,
The whole system flips. Suddenly there's a massive labor shortage. There aren't enough people to work the farms or run the shops.
so the peasants who survived, they suddenly became really valuable.
Incredibly valuable. For the first time, they could demand higher wages. They could ask for better conditions. If one landowner said no, they could just move and find work somewhere else.
This is a huge deal. It's the beginning of the end for the old feudal system, where people were tied to the land they were born on.
It's a massive crack in that foundation. The power dynamic shifted, and nobles had to give up some of their control. It fundamentally changed the structure of society.
But on a personal level, it must have been just terrifying, a culture of fear.
Intense fear. People abandoned their neighbors, their friends, sometimes even their own children, just to try and survive. The basic rules of society just dissolved in many places.
And that fear often turned to blame, didn't it?
It did. In their confusion and terror, some people looked for scapegoats and attacked minority groups, which only added to the chaos and lawlessness.
Even the church, which was the center of medieval life, was shaken.
Profoundly. Priests were on the front lines, tending to the sick, and they died in huge numbers. When people saw that even their religious leaders weren't safe, some of them started to lose faith.
So after the worst of it passed, how did that trauma show up in the culture?
You see it immediately in the art. A new theme emerges called the Dance Macabre, or the Dance of Death.
What was that?
There were these paintings and drawings of skeletons representing death dancing with everyone from kings and popes to merchants and peasants.
So the message was that death comes for us all.
Exactly. It was a constant reminder that life is fragile and that wealth and power mean nothing in the end.
But something positive did eventually come out of this tragedy, right? It kind of forced people to think differently about health.
It did. The failure of all the old myths, the bad smells, the leeches, forced a change. People had to start relying on what they could actually see and observe.
So what kind of changes are we talking about?
Well, for one, cities started to realize that cleaning up the streets and managing waste actually helped. It was a simple observation, but a revolutionary one.
And they started to isolate the sick.
Yes, they built hospitals away from healthy populations. The idea of separating the sick from the well was a huge step forward in public health.
And this is where quarantine comes from.
It is. The word comes from the Italian for 40 days. Ports would make arriving ships wait for 40 days before letting anyone ashore.
They didn't know exactly why it worked, just that it did.
They just knew it reduced the spread.
Yeah.
And that's the key. This move toward observation and evidence instead of superstition is what laid the groundwork for modern science and medicine.
The first wave of the plague finally started to fade in the early 1350s.
Yeah, those smaller outbreaks would continue for centuries. But Europe was completely transformed. A smaller population, a totally new social order.
And a new way of thinking based on evidence.
The Black Death was one of the darkest moments in history, for sure. But the way people responded to it, by observing, by cleaning up, by isolating, that really changed our relationship with disease forever.
It shows how even the worst disasters can force us to learn and build better systems for the future.
It's a powerful lesson that out of that tragedy came the seeds of modern public health.
Keep asking those deep questions and good luck with your studies.